running around. Enjoying your floor. Yeah, theoretically. I know the case.
All please rise. The judges of the New York State Court of Appeals and His Excellency, the Governor of the State of New York. The Law Day ceremony will now begin. All please be seated.
On behalf of my colleagues, I welcome all of you to this Law Day celebration. It was precisely 40 years ago, in 1957, that the American Bar Association conceived the idea for this event as a counterpart to the Soviet Union's proud display of military might on May Day. For the past 40 years, the American Bar Association, each and every Law Day, has set one single theme that unifies celebrations in courthouses and classrooms and meeting halls all throughout the country. This year's theme, as you see from your program, is Celebrate Your Freedom. By the way, for those of you who are really into anniversaries, I invite you back September 8th for the Court of Appeals celebration of its 150th anniversary. I recently noticed, however, that the Hallmark calendar anniversary list stops with diamonds at the 60th anniversary. So if you're planning on bringing a gift this fall, you're on your own. We're fortunate to have with us today to share thoughts on celebrating your freedom three outstanding lawyers: the Governor of the State of New York, George E. Pataki, Attorney General Dennis C. Vacco, and President of the New York State Bar Association, M. Catherine Richardson. While your program shows that the Governor will speak last, today we're going to do something that from time to time we do in this court, and that is reverse an order. The Governor will speak first, owing to his schedule. The Governor will speak first, and I'm now so pleased to call upon the Governor of the State of New York, George Pataki.
Thank you. Chief Judge Kaye, honorable judges of the Court of Appeals, Attorney General Vacco, President Richardson, Administrative Judge Lipman, to all the honorees and award winners and distinguished guests today, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this wonderful day. I'm honored to once again join all of you in this majestic courtroom to celebrate Law Day. Each day when this great court is in session, lawyers come from around the state, indeed from around the world, to argue their cause. And each day they hear what they are entitled to: a fair hearing before independent-minded judges whose only allegiance is to the law. Too often, we take that for granted. Indeed, we've come to expect it. But it is the rule of law and the role of the judiciary in interpreting and fairly applying the law that helps separate democracy from tyranny. And so it's especially important that all New Yorkers pause today to pay respect to our courts for their work in bringing justice to the people of our state. I want to talk to you today about two issues that I believe deserve our vigilant attention as we work to build a better state for our children and our grandchildren. The first involves the corrosive effect of overregulation in our society. On Law Day, it's commonplace to wax eloquent about how the growth of law has improved our lives and strengthened our society. And certainly, that has its truth. But the growth of law can also stifle human initiative and suffocate the human spirit. In his book, The Death of Common Sense, Philip Howard tells a story that makes this point very well. It's the story of the efforts of Mother Teresa and her missionaries of charity to build a homeless shelter in the South Bronx in the winter of 1988. Their proposal called for a facility that would provide temporary care for 64 homeless men in what was then a 4-story, fire-gutted, abandoned building. Who, might ask, could object to such a project? Who would undermine the humanitarian efforts of Mother Teresa? The answer to the question is as follows. After a year and a half of traveling from hearing room to hearing room across the county, the nuns were told that their plan failed to satisfy the requirements of the building code. The code mandated that an elevator in every renovated multi-story building had to be put in place, and their plan had no elevator. The nuns explained that because of their religious beliefs, they would never use the elevator, and that it would add $100,000 to the cost of the project, making it unworkable. Their plea fell on deaf ears. Their application for a waiver from the elevator requirement was denied. And so the missionaries of charity abandoned the project, explaining the episode had, and I quote, served to educate us about the law and its many complexities, unquote. Being governor has educated me, too, about the law and its many complexities, and about how the crazy quilt of regulations that have come to stifle us in many areas of economic life must be reformed. For too long, our response to a perceived program was to promulgate a detailed code of regulations to solve it. Our mantra was that if some law was good, more law was better. The result was a set of rules of Byzantine complexity that created countless billable hours for lawyers. Some of you are probably glad about that. But that, at the same time, often defied common sense. It may be heresy for a Columbia Law School graduate to say this, especially on Labor Day, on Law Day. But I can't help but believe that ours would be a better society if we had a few dozen less volumes of state regulations and a few thousand less lawyers needed to interpret them. Upon taking office, I initiated a painstaking review of all state regulations to ensure that the benefits of each rule outweighed its costs. Literally, thousands of regulations failed that test. Some were comical. The state, for example, required that local probation departments maintain their records on 8.5 by 11-inch paper. They couldn't computerize the records. They had to maintain them on this size paper unless they could get a waiver from the ruler. What made the regulation especially galling to probation directors is that issue, I'm told, that regulation was issued on 8.5 by 14-inch paper. That rule and others like it are being eliminated. Other regulations have passed our scrutiny, some in revised form, as necessary to protect the public welfare. That, too, is as it should be. In our zeal to strip away unnecessary regulations, we must not go overboard. We must remember that many regulations are essential to the health and safety of our citizens, to the safety of the workplace, and to the protection of our environment. Our watchword must be balance. Sometimes that will mean establishing ground rules for limited economic development in ecologically sensitive areas, as we did to protect Long Island's pine barrens. Other times it will mean environmental concerns totally outweigh economic interests, as we concluded in prohibiting logging in Allegheny State Park. But always we must appreciate the complexity of human life and the limitations of the law. To quote Philip Howard, "Law cannot save us from ourselves. Our energy and our resourcefulness, not millions of legal cubicles, is what is great about America. We must let judgment and personal conviction be important again. There is nothing unusual or frightening about it. Relying on ourselves is not, after all, a new ideology." The second issue I'd like to discuss this morning concerns the separation of powers in a democratic government. Just as our society came to believe that problems could be solved by promulgating detailed codes of regulation, it also came to believe that social problems could be solved by the courts. There was valid reason for that belief. As we all know, for too much of our history, African Americans were treated as second-class citizens in many parts of America. 50 years ago, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier at Ebbets Field. But on many other fields, youngsters of different races were forbidden to play and share the joys of childhood together. It took the United States Supreme Court to remedy that evil and to teach that separate but equal was not equal. Regrettably, the message that some people took from those historic decisions was that courts could and should solve all social problems. If you see a wrong, file a lawsuit. If several people see a wrong, file a class action. And too often, courts responded to those lawsuits by fashioning broad injunctive relief that told public administrators how to manage their institutions and how to conduct the public's business. The role of the courts, however, is not to solve society's problems or to micromanage its institutions. It's to resolve disputes between litigants fairly and expeditiously in accordance with the law. Judges must read the law and not write it as they simply deem appropriate. While we all bring our personal values into our lives and into our decisions, judges must recognize that some wrongs are not theirs to remedy. Permit me to tell you about one case that marked the point. It was brought by a woman who, 14 years ago, was convicted of murdering her infant daughter. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. She brought her action to set aside that sentence as too harsh in light of her extraordinary rehabilitation while she was in prison. Several members of the prison had written letters on her behalf, expressing their staunch belief that the community had much to gain and nothing to lose if she was released from custody. Even the local district attorney supported her cause. The case reached the 4th Department, where the dissenting judge ruled for the inmate. Quote, "Justice, equality, and common sense," unquote, he wrote, demanded her release. The majority took a different view. It wrote that the defendant had chosen, and I quote again, "the wrong forum for what may indeed be well-deserved relief," unquote. The governor, that court emphasized, had the power to grant her clemency, but a court had no authority to reduce a sentence 14 years after it was imposed. I believe the majority got it right. Its decision respected the separation of powers and the limited role of our courts. The decision, I should add, was authored by a distinguished jurist, Justice Richard Wesley, who now graces this honorable body. Last Christmas, I exercised the clemency power to commute the sentences of 7 individuals who had used their prison terms to become contributing members of our society. One of those individuals, Charlene Brundage, had served 15 years for the 1985 murder of her husband. Although the jury had rejected her claim of self-defense, the evidence was clear that she was a victim of domestic violence and that her act was a response to that abuse. The decision to commute Charlene Brundage's sentence was as difficult as any I've made as governor. No one accuses me of being soft on crime, and certainly that charge has never been levied in this body. But as much as I abhor domestic violence, I do not believe that a history of domestic violence can excuse the killing of another human being. Nor did I question the jury's verdict. The jury had followed the court's instructions, which was to refrain from exercising compassion or sympathy. The extraordinary power of clemency, however, allowed me to do just that. It permitted me to show compassion and recognize that Charlene Brundage's crime was an aberrant act. After much soul searching, I commuted the sentence. As I wrote at the time, the jury had carried out its duties responsibly in the Brundage case. I believed I carried out my constitutional duties responsibly as well. The separation of powers requires that all those making decisions in public matters, juries, judges, legislators, and governors, respect each other's rules and not usurp the other's authority. When any of us ignores that fundamental principle, even in a just cause, we threaten the very foundation of government. One final note: to believe as I do in the separation of powers is not to believe that the three branches of government cannot work together on common concerns. We have worked together magnificently in the past 3 years. Perhaps no effort has been more successful than the reforms that have been made in the jury system, reforms that Chief Judge Kaye deserves enormous credit for initiating. A jury of one's peers has always been a bulwark against tyranny in our criminal justice system. It's always been an innocent defendant's best friend. And Chief Judge Kaye has been the best friend the jury system in this state has ever had. In the past, jurors were often treated shabbily, and privileged classes were exempted from service. That has changed. We've gone far to abolish the rule of mandatory sequestration and recognize that jury duty is an obligation of all citizens. Now, even governors and chief judges are called to serve. That is as it should be. So let us take pride in our past successes and commit ourselves to future cooperation as we celebrate Law Day in this hallowed chamber. Thank you again for inviting me to participate in today's sermon.
Thank you so much, Governor, for your kind remarks and for your very important message and for being with us. I should have mentioned at the outset that the Governor's schedule required him to leave right after his remarks. It had nothing to do with the enthusiasm or warmth of your response. I'd next like to call on the President of the New York State Bar Association, Catherine Richardson.
Chief Judge Kaye, esteemed jurists, Attorney General Vacco, honorees, and friends. As I left my office this morning to drive to Albany, I was told by a young associate who has been doing much of my work this year that this year's Law Day theme, Celebrate Your Freedom, had a very special meaning to him. Since there are only 30 days left before I turn over the presidency to Josh Brzezinski, he feels there are 30 days left so he can celebrate his freedom. And it also made me realize that that wonderful word freedom means so many different things to different people. For many of us in this courtroom, we immediately think of our constitutionally protected freedoms of religion, speech, assembly, freedom from unreasonable search, and freedom to vote in spite of our race, color, or sex. But as I have traveled around our state this year, I have met many who are seeking more basic freedoms. Freedom from abuse, homelessness, and hopelessness. And I have met the lawyers who, through legal aid societies, volunteer lawyer pro bono programs, and legal service corporations, who are trying their utmost to procure those freedoms. Our federal leaders 32 years ago recognized the need for government-funded legal services for the poor. That early program to aid local legal aid societies was continued with the enactment of federal law in 1974 and the establishment of the Legal Services Corporation. In 1995, the legal services programs across the United States, and now that's just the legal services corporations, not the volunteer lawyer pro bono programs, not the non-LSC funded programs, but the LSC programs alone assisted approximately 5 million indigent citizens. Without the assistance of lawyers, the courts would be out of the practical reach of the average poor family. Without access to our justice system, there really is no justice. And the freedoms we celebrate today become merely words to some citizens of our state. All of these programs, as they approach middle age, have matured with time and experience. They have become an invaluable resource for poor persons in resolving their basic legal needs: shelter, food, battery, child custody, and others. These programs epitomize the partnership of government, the courts, lawyers, and our communities. Many of our local legal programs build on the federal funding by obtaining additional support from the private and public sector. Indeed, many of our pro bono programs that exist across the state depend on the staffed legal services to provide the administration, the training of volunteer lawyers, the screening, and the matching of the volunteer lawyer with a client. Yet in recent years, the very existence of the Legal Service Corporation has been in jeopardy in this climate of federal budget cutbacks, and in the wake of criticism by opponents who even question the need for the services. Referencing these attacks, one beleaguered legal aid attorney commented, "The only thing more unpopular than a poor person is a poor person with a lawyer." And what a shame that time must be expended to defend the defender of the indigent. Thanks to tremendous advocacy efforts by members of the bar and the public, LSC has survived another year with reduced funding levels and increased restrictions on those functions. This year, a $283 million appropriation was secured from the federal government, but that's 1/3 less than the amount allocated 2 years ago. New York programs will receive approximately $17 million, down from $25 million at its peak. Everyone understands the need to do more with less resources today. But it is a disservice to the indigent and the public in general when justice is downsized to the degree that programs live from year to year in fear of becoming victims of budget cuts, or must close offices and try to triage the remaining caseloads. Disseminating the government-funded programs also causes that related voluntary pro bono programs to unravel. This is just no way to respond to the needs of our poor. As you can tell, I am unabashedly a proponent of the need for staffed legal services. I am a second-generation advocate. My mother was a community member of the board, and my father and I each served as president of the Hiscox Legal Aid Society in Syracuse. And I know firsthand that the faces behind the statistics express the need for these services. Just ask the Long Island man in a wheelchair who was served with an eviction notice. He has multiple sclerosis, his wife lost her job the day before, and they have 3 children. Legal service providers came to their assistance. Or talk with the elderly couple from a rural western county who, because of a brief hospital stay, had their home health care benefits stopped. Legal service attorneys arranged for the restoration of the health services. The seniors were able to return to their home and avoided institutionalization. As Justice Lewis F. Powell expressed, equal justice under the law is not merely a caption on the facade of the Supreme Court building. It is perhaps the most inspirational ideal of our society. It is fundamental that justice should be the same in substance and availability without regard to economic status. Members of the private bar and government attorneys contribute more than 2 million hours of free legal services to the poor each year in New York State. I know of no other profession that even comes close to duplicating this effort. Yet, it is neither feasible nor appropriate for the volunteers to be the sole solution to what should be everyone's concern. Through state legislation supported by our association, in 1993, it was enacted the Interest on Lawyer Account Fund, or IOLA. It was established to provide additional sources of funds by enabling interest to be earned from nominal or short-term client accounts that lawyers had, and that individually they would not produce a lot of revenue. Unfortunately, the decline of interest rates caused the IOLA grants to go from $24 million in 1992 to $12 million this year. In the past year, the New York legislature responded and authorized a $3.6 million appropriation for legal services to try to counter the $8 million drop in federal funding. The time couldn't be more ripe for us here in New York to move from the year-to-year uncertainty with the funding to the establishment of a regularized support and funding system at the state level, just as has been done in our neighboring states of Massachusetts and New Jersey. Our leaders had made great strides in providing health care for the poor, including immunization, so that a poor child doesn't lose hearing from a childhood disease. But we have really come up short in providing legal services to that child's mother to help remove her and the child from an abusive home where a blow to the head could cause that same deafness and maybe even worse. So I have a challenge for all of us in this room, for those who work across the park, and for many across the state. A challenge that I know the New York State Bar Association is going to accept. And it's a challenge I hope you cannot refuse. First, I challenge our members and all the lawyers in the state to step up their pro bono efforts, to find some time in that 10 to 12-hour day to serve the critical legal needs of our poor. I challenge our legislative leaders, Senator Bruno and Speaker Silver, to find ways to get both sides of the aisle to address this important issue and to move it above the fray of partisan politics. I challenge Attorney General Vacco to keep up the great work he started this year by encouraging and facilitating his lawyers to participate in pro bono programs. I challenge our Chief Judge, in her eloquent way, to not only speak out for judicial independence, jury reform, and court restructuring, but to speak out also on behalf of access to our justice system by all, especially the voiceless of our state. And finally, I challenge our governor to exercise his leadership, to foster a partnership of the three branches of government, the lawyers in this state, and the public sector to work out a creative solution for permanent funding for civil legal services for our poor. I would hope that a year from today, when Josh Przansky stands here, we will have accepted this challenge, and all the citizens of our state will have reason to celebrate their freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Richardson. Next, we will hear from the Attorney General of the State of New York, Dennis C. Vacco.
Thank you. Chief Judge Kaye, Associate Judges of this esteemed court, Judge Lippman, honorable members of the judiciary, members of the bar, President Richardson, indeed, thank you very much for allowing me a few brief moments today to share my thoughts and reflections on celebrating our freedom. Additionally, Judge Kaye, let me also thank you for reordering the program so as to afford me the chance to have the last word here today, even though I agree with all that has been said before me. Today we celebrate a new milestone in our celebration of the law. As we commemorate Law Day of 1997, we mark almost unbelievably the 40th anniversary of our celebration of the law as guardian of our freedom. Now, we all know that much has changed over the past 4 decades. But let's just take a quick snapshot of how much that change has meant. In 1957, a loaf of bread cost just 19 cents. A new Pontiac cost slightly more than the average American income about $4,600 a year. That same year, some of us in this room might remember, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik into orbit, and America indeed was consumed in the deepening Cold War that posed the greatest threat to our freedom and liberty. We have an ability and indeed a tendency to look back nostalgically on events of the not-too-distant past, and even some today look back nostalgically on the 1970s, as unbelievable as that is. But it is clear that with the passage of time, many things indeed change. The customs and institutions of modern society need to evolve, adapt, and transform. But through all of this evolution, one thing cannot change. That is our commitment to preserving freedom. Freedom which gives rise to opportunity and hope. As I was contemplating these remarks here earlier today, it struck me that one American who probably best described freedom was Thomas Jefferson, when he described freedom in the Declaration of Independence as the guarantee of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was those principles, those three principles, that drew my grandfather to these shores like so many millions of immigrants came to this great land. This year, 1997, holds added significance for me and my family. You see, it was 90 years ago this year that my family, my grandfather and his mother and father, arrived in this great land, filled with hopes and dreams of becoming an American. 90 years ago, a young man of 12 years old set out to a strange new land with his family, determined to build a life and family from the very soil of this great country and this great state. I know from what he told me that he knew very little about the law, but he understood, as did his mother and father, their thirst for freedom. Looking to the future in 1907, my grandfather could not have ever imagined the opportunities that would be made available to him. I know that it was impossible for him to dream in 1907 that one day his grandson would be standing before this august court, the highest court in the state of the great state of New York, as New York's 62nd Attorney General. And indeed, he could not have imagined that I would be here today seeking to put into words the dreams that motivated him. And I know that he could not have envisioned that 4 months earlier, in January of this year, that I would stand before the highest court of this land, defending the laws of this great state that guarantee our freedom. As he faced challenges in his own life, my grandfather was committed to preserving opportunity and freedom for his children. Through hard work, a dedication to his community, and a respect for the law is how he went about attempting to guarantee freedom for his offspring. The world, we know, is a far different place today than in the time of my grandfather, and even a far different place than it was in 1957. The Cold War, thankfully, is a distant memory. And now today, my two sons live in a world whose international borders are far more secure than at any time in the past 100 years, perhaps indeed in history. However, we know, because it's exhibited every day in this courtroom, there are many new challenges to the freedom that we have inherited. Today, the threat to freedom is as likely to lurk in a schoolyard or within a computer terminal or around the corner on the next block. The threat to freedom now resides, unfortunately and tragically, in the homes of thousands of abused children, like Elise Izquierdo, Lisa Steinberg, or Daquan Bennett. Opportunity and hope are threatened when 6 million women each year are victims of domestic violence in this nation, when 4 women each week in New York lose their lives to domestic violence. Life and liberty are lost when police officers like New York's Kevin Gillespie or Buffalo's Skip McDougal are slain while working to defend the freedom of others. These are the new challenges to our freedom, challenges which demand flexibility and change in the law. In some cases, that means more laws. In others, it demands indeed stricter enforcement of existing laws. And of course, therein lies the paradox. Can a society truly be more free with an increasing volume of rules and restrictions? Can more strict demands for compliance with those laws designed to protect the rights of society serve, indeed, to liberate individuals? Certainly, we can point to specific laws that serve to guarantee liberty and freedom. In the past 40 years, we have turned to the law to overcome fundamental challenges to our nation's purpose, that is, ensuring the rights and freedom of all of the citizens of this great land. 40 years ago, as we mark milestones today, Congress enacted the Civil Rights Act of 1957. The nation proudly stood as one to celebrate basic rights of all Americans to participate in government, regardless of the color of their skin. New laws have expanded the power of crime victims to seek redress, opened once secret government files to expose the shameful abuse of children, and new laws have expanded the powers of police to detain and question those suspected of involvement in dangerous family violence. Each of these new laws, which clearly limit the rights of individuals in specific instances, each of these new laws indeed are designed to preserve and protect the freedom and liberty that each one of us holds so dear. In the case of Elisa's law, privacy concerns of an individual may indeed now be outweighed by the far more compelling interest in preserving the safety of helpless, vulnerable children. The new proactive arrest policy in domestic violence cases dramatically expands the ability for police intervention, usually right in the security and comfort of an individual's own home. But this seemingly extraordinary tactic is amply justified by the lives it saves and the terror it hopefully prevents. New laws that limit the ability of individuals to send indecent material through the expanses of the internet may seem to fly in the face of the First Amendment's guarantee of freedom of speech. But when the costs are no less than the safety and protection of our children, the benefit of unlimited free speech seems to fade in the balance. 40 years ago, in 1957, President Dwight David Eisenhower challenged all of us with these words: "The love of liberty means the guarding of every resource that makes freedom possible." The law appropriately recognizes the need to shield citizens from improper searches and self-incrimination, but it must not be stretched beyond the limits of common sense to restrain police and prosecutors in their efforts to protect citizens from physical harm, or ignore the rights and needs of innocent victims. The law guarantees a level playing field for businesses and commerce, but it cannot and should not become a tool by which companies escape liability for repeated and deliberate acts of deception that threaten the health and safety of our citizens. When we exercise responsibility and respect for the law, we are indeed celebrating our freedom. As elected officials, as legislators, as members of the judiciary, it remains our duty today, as in 1957, indeed as it was in 1907, to protect the blessings of liberty. As the law stretches and adapts to confront new challenges, we are obliged to ensure that it never expands beyond its appropriate role of protecting and preserving freedom and opportunity. Our nation, our world has changed a great deal in the past 40 years. The way we live is dramatically different and that of our parents and our grandparents. But the promise of freedom is in my mind as strong as ever, thanks in large part to our commitment and dedication to one another and to the law. More than 200 years after our forefathers established and ordained our Constitution, we, their posterity, are still celebrating our freedom in the law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Vacco. I would point out to you that although we did reverse an order, we always get the last word. Today we gather to celebrate our freedom and the vital role the law plays in securing that cherished principle. In this country, we have so many wonderful traditional ways to celebrate our freedom, like great bursts of songs and festive parades and explosions of fireworks. I think that only a judge, well, perhaps a lawyer, would think of celebrating freedom by construing the word. But I think it's fitting to reflect just a bit on exactly what it is that we're celebrating. Freedom, on the one hand, can be viewed as a negative concept, as the absence of oppression or interference, as freedom from. Millions across the centuries have given their lives in the struggle for freedom from persecution, freedom from slavery, freedom from tyranny. But there's a positive aspect to freedom as well, freedom to pursue our dreams and ambitions, to strive, to achieve, to excel. As our nation's history reveals, it is freedom too that makes possible the greatest achievements of the human spirit. In my introductory remarks, I mentioned two anniversaries being celebrated this year, Law Day's 40th and the Court of Appeals' 150th. There's a third I'd like to acknowledge, the governor did too, the 50th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's breaking of the color barrier in Major League Baseball. I mentioned that anniversary because the life of Jackie Robinson offers dramatic examples of the power both of freedom from and freedom to. 50 years ago, Jackie Robinson walked onto Ebbets Field and into the pages of history. Through his talent, his grace, his perseverance, Jackie Robinson taught us all about the wisdom of equal opportunity and about the difference a single person can make with commitment, determination, and skill. Jackie Robinson's baseball career illustrates the value of freedom from, but his life also illustrates the positive aspect, the freedom to. On his tombstone is this powerful inscription: "A life is not important except in the impact that it has on other lives." An epitaph honoring the positive side of freedom. Freedom to make a difference, freedom to raise others up, freedom to help others achieve their fullest potential. On Law Day, we celebrate the role of strong and independent courts in safeguarding our political freedoms from freedom from censorship, from unwarranted governmental intrusion into our privacy, from denial of due process, from invidious discrimination. But lawyers and courts do much more than that. They also protect and enforce private freedoms from freedom from violence in the home, from child abuse, from parental neglect. Clearly, we must have freedom from in both the public and the private sphere if freedom to is to flourish. For far too long, these private freedoms were considered just that, private. They were family matters, not worthy of public scrutiny or concern. Thankfully, that silence has been broken. The issue of family justice has moved to the front pages of our newspapers and the front ranks of public consciousness. We now recognize that a beating at home injures just as surely as any mugging on the street, that we must be as concerned when a child faces a bully in the living room as one in the schoolyard, that child support is not a gift, not a frill, but a legal obligation. We have recently made a special commitment to ensure that the courts that enforce these private freedoms function as well as is humanly possible, and the challenge is an enormous one. Last year alone, the courts of this state received more than 700,000 new family matters. Some of these, like domestic violence and child abuse cases, are literally matters of life and death. Others, like child support cases, can determine what groceries are bought this week or who gets new shoes for school. But if we truly believe in ensuring all children the freedom to reach their fullest potential, it's clear that we must pay close attention to these family matters now. This year, we look forward to working with the executive and the legislature to restructure the helter-skelter design of our trial courts so that we can elevate family justice matters and create a truly unified family court. But while we're working on the redesign of the structure, we're also moving forward to improve our effectiveness under the existing system. We're speeding up adoptions for children in foster care, creating parent drug treatment courts to address the pivotal role that substance abuse plays in child neglect, opening family court night parts so that working people don't have to choose between a day's wages and the court services, establishing matrimonial enforcement parts that provide swift judicial response to contempt motions and other emergency applications. Initiatives like these have real-life consequences. Children need caring, stable homes so they can enjoy their freedom to learn and to grow. They need courts whose time frames are set by their perspective, not ours. And that is what we seek to promote with our Family Justice Program. We'll work cooperatively with our partners in government to achieve these goals, and we'll draw upon 3 other magnificent resources that we are so fortunate to have. The first, of course, are the judges of the New York State court system, so many of whom are here today, and I'm so pleased to acknowledge the Chief Administrative Judge, the Deputy Chiefs, the PJ, the justices of the 3rd Department, the presiding justice of the Court of Claims, and on and on and on. These judges so magnificently committed to the rule of law and committed to improving the court's ability to deliver justice effectively and efficiently. The second great resource are our non-judicial employees. When Judge Lippman presents this year's Merit Performance Awards, all of us will hear more about the difference these dedicated public servants make in our efforts to serve the public well. I congratulate this year's recipients. You are shining examples of excellence and achievement in our courts. And third are the lawyers of this state. Their zealous representation of every client ensures that the wheels of justice continue to turn day in and day out. Their generous pro bono work, and I accept your challenge, President Richardson, further serves the cause of justice in our communities. They help an abused woman find the services she needs to break free of an unhealthy relationship. They teach school children about our system of justice and nonviolent conflict resolution. They serve on task forces to make our courts work even better. On Law Day 1997, we celebrate all of our freedoms. The freedoms that our strong and independent legal system safeguard for us in our homes and in the public square. The freedom, too, that each must determine how best to use. A life is not important except in the impact that it has on other lives. We here in this chamber are uniquely privileged to have the freedom to make a difference, to raise others up, to help them achieve their dreams and their ambitions, and that surely is the most prized freedom of all. This Law Day, let us indeed celebrate our freedom, and let us resolve to use our precious opportunity wisely and well. Thank you. next on our program is the presentation of awards by the Chief Administrative Judge of the courts, Jonathan Lipman, who has represented to me that we will break from tradition this year. He will not read from the script. You can read from the script. Judge Lipman.
This year's Merit Performance Awards are given to 5 exceptional individuals. Each of the recipients has, in a very real sense, improved the lives of the citizenry of this state. I am honored on behalf of the New York State Unified Court System to be able to present the 1997 Merit Performance Awards to these outstanding public servants on this Law Day. I would commend to you, as the Chief Judge just did, the descriptions in your programs of the superlative efforts of each of the awardees, resulting in their being honored today. Each recipient should please come forward when your name is called. The first 1997 Merit Performance Award is for heroism and is awarded to Gary G. Fish, Deputy Sheriff, Jefferson County. In November of 1996, in the early morning hours, Deputy Sheriff Fish alertly discovered a live pipe bomb hidden among various papers on the 5th floor of the Jefferson County Family Court in a heavily trafficked area of the building. Recognizing the great danger to all those who come to the courthouse, litigants, attorneys, judges, and non-judicial employees, Deputy Sheriff Fish, not knowing how long the bomb had been there, took it upon himself at great personal risk to immediately but calmly remove the bomb to a remote area outside of the building where the risk to the public was minimal. Deputy Fish then notified the authorities, and the bomb was deactivated without incident, avoiding tragic results. For his courage and quick action in the face of great danger to himself and to his fellow citizens, we honor Deputy Sheriff Gary G. Fish on Law Day 1997 with a Merit Performance Award. Kathleen Anderson, Court Officer, Nassau County Family Court. Kimberly Williams, Court Officer, New York County Family Court. '97 Merit Performance Awards for outstanding performance in the workplace. The family court today is the focus of so much of our attention because that court every day has such a significant impact on the well-being of families and children throughout the state. The court system's efforts institutionally are evidenced by the new Family Justice Program discussed by the Chief Judge, laying the foundation for a new family court with innovative and creative solutions to the societal problems of today. It is particularly the interests of children that the family court must serve. Children in crisis need our protection, support, help, and love. Kathleen Anderson and Kimberly Williams have provided children with all of these things in their service in the family court. Kathleen, helping a 3-year-old abused child in Nassau County Family Court who needed comfort and support in the courthouse and later into the night at the hospital, Kathleen gave her angel, as she affectionately nicknamed the child, help and understanding, plus toys and clothes that she collected with her fellow court officers to let the child know that people cared about her and loved her. Officer Kimberly Williams showed that same caring for a lost child in New York County Family Court, staying with him in the courthouse, the hospital, and during extensive questioning by police until that child was identified and safe, going far beyond the call of duty to comfort a child in need of help, and in the process showing that child the human face of the justice system. We are proud to honor Officers Kathleen Anderson and Kimberly Williams with the 1997 Merit Performance Awards for their superb work in protecting and caring for children in a court dedicated to those ends. Sandra Alvarez, Principal Office Assistant, Putnam County Surrogates Court. (1997) Merit Performance Award for Outstanding Performance in the Workplace. The future of our courts and our ability to better serve the public is in significant measure contingent on using the benefits of computer technology to modernize the way we process the almost 4 million cases filed in the courts each year. Sandra Alvarez is helping to make this effort a reality each and every day in Putnam County Surrogates Court. Sandra has spent her days, her nights, and her weekends, in addition to her normal work duties, working on a new database file for Surrogates Court to replace the manual system that has previously been used. Her innovation, creativity, and work ethic has resulted in a new data system being installed in all of the Surrogates Courts in the 9th Judicial District, fostering the efficient and quick resolution of surrogate court matters and allowing court personnel to focus on the needs of the users of the court. Justice is faster and simpler in the Surrogates Court in Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, and Orange counties, thanks to Sandra Alvarez. We are proud to honor her with the 1997 Merit Performance Award for Outstanding Workplace Performance. The last 1997 Merit Performance Award is given to Bradley Pinsky, Law Clerk, New York State Court of Claims. This award is for community service and humanitarian pursuits. Bradley Pinsky has left an indelible mark on the young people of Broome County. While serving as a Court of Claims law clerk to Judge Hannafin, Brad founded a program to provide a meaningful response to misdemeanor offenses such as vandalism and shoplifting committed by juveniles between 11 and 15 years of age. Teens being judged by their peers in the youth court that Brad created has helped over 100 young people to learn about responsibility and being a good citizen while performing community service sentences. Not one of the teens has run afoul of the law, again, due to Brad's invaluable program to which he has devoted hundreds of hours of his own time to organize and administer this effort. The whole community is part of Brad's program. Law enforcement agencies, high schools, the county attorney's office, the state bar, and the United Way. And the state is providing $60,000 in grant money, all thanks to Brad's efforts. I am delighted to be able to present Bradley Pinsky with a 1997 Merit Performance Award. The Unified Court System could not be prouder of each of this year's recipients who represent the very best of the men and women who toil in the courts every day on behalf of the public. We thank each of them and all of the other employees working in the courts who they represent. I also want to thank Chief Judge Kaye and the Court of Appeals for once again allowing the Merit Performance Awards to be a part of the Law Day ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Lippman. On behalf of my colleagues, Judges Titone, Bellicosa, Smith, Levine, Siparik, and Wesley, I want to offer sincerest congratulations to all of today's award winners. I'd like to thank today's speakers, and I would like to thank all of you for being with us and joining in our celebration. Have a great day.